Welcome, everyone. This is Nichel Anderson, and I'm your host for my podcast show where I'm broadcasting both on my Power of Reading Week. So today I'm focusing on the Harlem Renaissance. This particular era is so very influential to me personally, as I had got the opportunity to be a columnist for the Harlem Renaissance, and that helped me to kind of really look into the history of it and discover all of the talent during that time. And I wanted to focus this year during my week focusing on reading about that particular time period, that era, that who contributed to it, what's the history about it. I love history, and why I am connecting now of the new era of the new Renaissance, where Dr. W.E.B Du Bois to me was prophesizing it in his essay of the Rings of Atlanta. And we're going to talk about the history of the Harlem Renaissance. I should be able to kind of cover everything I wanted to cover. And that could be for anybody that's listening and wanting to know about it. This would be a great episode for me to introduce it to you, and can probably inspire you to go look for these particular Black artists in the sense of writing, even music or art, and be connected that way, or the books that you'll be finding out, even me, referencing them to consider to read. So I wanted to kind of get into that, and before I kind of, the rest of the week, I haven't done it before when I first started this, my focusing on reading, and I think it will be appropriate time as I'm connecting what Dr. W.E.B Du Bois mentioned in his essay to what I feel is currently evolving in the new, we call it the DTC, direct to consumer, where we are our own creators of our economy. We are working with different types of people, different types of talent to create what we was called to be our purpose or the expression of that. And so I feel like he foreseen what Atlanta would be way back in that time. And now when he started the magazine for the NAACP, The Crisis, that's now over 116 years ago from today, in this year currently 2026 when I'm recording this, and I think it's so profound. So I wanted to kind of talk about that, or talk about that, where I'm also going to pivot in the sense of connecting it now, how some similarities are there, how the purpose and the understanding of it back then and what it is now over 100 years later. And so we're kind of going to get into that. So before I get ready and start, let me go ahead and say my prayer. All right. And in this day, I am thankful to God that I give ultimate praise and gratitude for this blessing of my podcast shows, the opportunity to share for others of the collective, that they can as well move forward on their journey and learn from what my platform aims to provide. And that is a platform of expression, right? And the giving and receiving, that I will use it for the greater good in the name of Jesus. Amen. Hallelujah. Let's go ahead and get into this. So I love the Harlem Renaissance. I think it is just the ultimate type of expression of time. It was where achievement and success that connects to the theme of my song, Atlanteans. And that's not just to plug in. If you look at in the sense of what I was saying in my lyrics, it's the ultimate type of success and feeling good about it, feeling good about the accomplishment, doing your best, and in that you are giving. I just love the Harlem Renaissance. So what we're going to do is just kind of go through the history of it and go from there. And so today I won't be necessarily reading a book. Today I'm talking about the time period where books, writing, poetry, music, because that's basically what books are. It's a snapshot of time. It's a time frame where we're telling these stories and we're doing it in a way that can motivate and influence. And to me, that is the overall expression of the Harlem Renaissance. So let's kind of start at the beginning, particularly where I'm connecting W. Du Bois, for those that want to kind of like have a quick study of that. So the Harlem Renaissance itself, it was basically like a collective cultural movement. It was born from the framework of the timeline where they call it the Great Migration. And that's basically where people from African Americans from the South was heading towards the North, right? And that would be like New York City or what have you. And Dr. W. Du Bois, he was born in a time where slavery was basically, where it was that transition from slavery time to not, and then that transition to still be able to do what was promised to have the freedom of expression. So it was still resistance to that. So then we get into close to the turn of the century. And that's where from 19, I think it's 1901 to 1902 to 1903 is where Dr. W.E.B Du Bois wrote that infamous book, The Souls of Black Folk, which I'm currently reading the essays. When I was a columnist for the Harlem Renaissance on that site, I actually went through each of his essays and critiqued it. It was just profound. It's just something about that time period when you're able to read those books that came out of that time period. It's just one of the best type of talent that you're going to come across of, and it's hard to kind of like, put it down, or even with the art, or even with the music, which I'm going to focus on that a little bit here, but going further. And at any rate, fast forward to after he wrote that book, and his accomplishment in academics and the world stage in that sense, because he definitely went famous around the time he wrote that book. That was around about 1902 to 1903. So I did a movie about his journey and Booker T. Washington, and it's called Dawn of New Day. Right now, it's not streaming. By the time this airs, it's not available to be streamed. It was before, but the platform sold it to another platform, and then all that drama. But it's just available on DVD, and soon I'm going to have that up available if you was interested in getting that on my other website. But nonetheless, with this one, W.E.B. Du Bois, he nurtured what was going to be the Harlem Renaissance. Around about 1910 is where it ended up creating the magazine for NAACP. They call it the Crisis. So the other thing that was forming, like right after that, was the Negro Urban League. They called it NUL, and they had a magazine, and they called that Opportunity. So between those two magazines and the statue that was bringing to that, which was Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, was high excellence, as a lot of people was moving towards the north to New York and to show the expertise. So that's like when I mentioned the music, like Duke Ellington, he's in that area of music and expression. But when we get to the Harlem Renaissance, it was Alan Locke. He was a philosopher, a writer. They called him like the father of the Harlem Renaissance. He actually named it different. I think it was the New Negro Movement, because again, it was where opportunities arise available up north. I could say that opportunities in that sense of work, I guess you can say, or maybe not so as intense it was in South, but you can understand that because the South did have its problems when we got into the 60s. But Alan Locke was part of that, promoting and defining what the movement was when a lot of black folks was moving up north. And so he was the one to kind of really started framing what this was. And to create a community, you have to have the basics and the foundation and the structure. So he's one of the architects. Other architect, of course, is my favorite one. What I just mentioned was Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. He was a socialist. He was an NAACP leader. He provided the black arts and promoted it because that reinforced where the fear of equality, because he was going in a time where black folks was not held at esteem, disrespected, couldn't do this, a lot of stereotyping to fit in that category of not being respected as a human, if you could say it that way. And so with that, he promoted the black arts, and he published many of the Renaissance writers during that time in his journal. He edited the Crisis, the magazine in NAACP. So he was part of the creation of that organization, and then the magazine came with it. So then from that, they had contests, as they said back then, and that's how these famous writers that I have featured Langston Hughes last year on this beautiful poem, which I'm going to do because he had wrote a collection of poems. So I'll be reading that, doing going forward in my reading of the week, power of reading of the week type thing I'm going to do, every year. So I'm going to definitely do that. And then you had Zora Neale Hurston. Oh my gosh, she's one of my favorite ones. I mean, when I read that book, Their Eyes Were Watching God, which I'm going to be featuring and start reading during my week. I'm going to start next tomorrow, and going forward, it'll be like broken up in series like I have done Dr. Du Bois. But it created this opportunity that's how we met Zora Neale Hurston. So she's a novelist and anthropologist who celebrates folk lore and the culture of the rural South. And her writing is just, she's just a masterpiece. I just love her, how her expression is, and I cannot wait to start reading it. It is such a good book. I mean, I can't even put in words what it is. It's just perfection, I could say. And she captured the perspective of a woman, a black woman that can really, I don't know, it's just a journey. So anyway, we will get deep into that, okay? Because it's gonna be a long time before I finally say I'm finished with that on my podcast show because I love that book. And so the other one was Aaron Douglas. He was considered also part of the African American art to define the visual language for the black identity. So as we get to Harlem Renaissance, it's basically a collective of expression of showing that black folks was worthy to can inspire more than what they came out of. And so with all that movement and excitement of expression, what do you do with it? And that's where Dr. W.E.B Du Bois and Alan Locke felt that we need to organize this movement. We need to, have some type of structure and what is considered, the highest level of excellence. You could not mess up during that time because you had to be on your game. And that's basically what both of them, Dr. Du Bois and Alan Locke, created. Okay. So with the Great Migration, with the millions, they said, African Americans moved from the South to the northern cities like Harlem, they created these vibrant communities of expression. And therefore, that's where the two magazines, The Crisis and The Opportunity, had these contests to really kind of, make it interesting and engaging. And it created the new reality to define the identity of black folks. They were patronists, people that patron the arts of those was going on, and that was there was non-black, right? There was American, there was white, there was different cultural backgrounds. They helped finance like most of these, right? So the artists start to express, a more proud, self-determined black identity, moving beyond the stereotypes that they came out of, which was from back in doing that time, like getting out of slavery and finding your identity, where you move, and opportunities to the new black experience in America. So it helped to create a cultural explosion that had to be organized, and those top leaders were Alan Locke and Du Bois. And then you get into the other ones that define it. They said it was actually Langston Hughes that was credited to introducing the name Harlem Renaissance from the new Negro movement, right? And with that, that helped to kind of really define it so it could be so popular. So then we have, they said they named someone else. They said James Weldon Johnson. He was also described part of the literature of Negro literature. And so a part of that growth and that burst of the movement. And it's it's interesting when I said in my previous, it was in December, where I'm coming to a conclusion that this is the era of a new renaissance because now direct to consumer, the artist is taking control of the revenue generated for what they created so they can create more things so they have more freedom. And it's funny because that's what Dr. Du Bois was fighting for the freedom of expression to show that we earned it and we could be intellectual black folks, right? And when we fast forward, to me, it's kind of beyond now. You still got issues in the community, but at the same time, it's now expression of connecting with different race. I kind of talked about it in the previous episode. So here, when you go and look at the Harlem Renaissance, they say basically it was a movement. Fast forward now, it is a movement of expression, the freedom to create, the freedom not have to be on a certain platform in itself, and you have to do this and do that and do that, and you be able to connect to those people that follow you and love your work. And that's a movement of the direct to consumer because we're basically creating our own ecosystem. So when we look at that, Alan Lockley, he provided basically the philosophical foundation urging black folks to kind of look, at their heritages and their roots for inspiration, which is funny because when I get into Zora Neale Hurston, she got criticized to some of those leaders, black leaders that had a good influential. Most of them seem so far that I read through was males, and but she was doing what the forefathers that created the Harlem Renaissance, the energy, needed to do was referencing it. So then, why all the backlash? And I think to me, I'm going to get into it, but I say it now. I think that she was before their time. The writing was so profound, so excellent, so extraordinary. I'm on my cry, laugh, and whatever and repeat it. I love that book. Is that it was beyond, to me, I won't say the comprehension, but the understanding of what she was expressing, the language and the scenes and the message that perhaps was intimidated, and that to me she didn't get all that she should have gotten when she was there. But to me, I think now, and we'll get into those that was a pioneer to bring her work back. We're gonna get into those that contributed to kind of keep her work reviving, and I'm gonna do that as well on my podcast show because she gave so much in that book that still have an impression on me and impression on other people, and she deserved all the accolades. I mean, that's talent, that's a blessing of how she expressed in that book. So then you have Dr. W.E.B Du Bois as editor of the NAACP magazine. Like I said, Crisis. He actually published and promoted young writers as well, and he provided an additional platform for the movement, right, birth, that I feel is the movement now with the DTC movement. And then you have Charles Johnson, and he was the editor of the Opportunity magazine. So he organized the events. Some of them they call, I think one of them was the 1924 Civic Club Diner. So that helped connect black writers with publishers that they can help with their work. So if we kind of recap and stop and kind of make sure we're covering everything. So basically it was Alan Lockley and W. Du Bois. They were basically the architect to organize this movement of so much massive black folks coming up north in Harlem. And they provided the intellectual structure as well as the cultural framework of what considered to be the top of the game type of expression of talent. And then you have the Negro Urban League, and they created a magazine too. So Dr. Du Bois was part of the NAACP, and they had a magazine called The Crisis. That's one bend. The second bend is the Opportunity. That's from Negro Urban League organization, and that also was helped by other outside of the community, of the black folks community, and they funded and created it. So you have that mixture of people that help black folks in that sense to be able to do the expression of in art. So with that, the second band, the Opportunity, part of the organization Negro Urban League, came, they worked hand in hand with Dr. Du Bois in his magazine. So then at the Crisis, which is connected to NAACP, and where W. Du Bois was one of the main leaders there, was part of that movement and helped nurture the talents that was coming through, which was all by they having these contests started. And that's where Langston Hughes and also another one, Conti Coolin, these people that became a part of that. So then you have this call like somebody else. It was Hubert Harrison. He was part of the Harlem Renaissance. He founded the organization, the Liberty League, and then the newspaper, The Voice, that dedicated to the movement. It started like around 1917. The Harlem Renaissance peak was right 1923 to 1927, that was the peak. So this here before that was all in the beginning of building this excellent top of the line type community of, you could say, creators there. They wasn't saying it then, but we could say it now. So those writers was Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Claude McKay, Conti Coolin, and countless others that I am going to do another podcast to go over those other ones that are just as important and great talent. So then the artists like Aaron Douglas and different other one provided the art, right? And then the musician Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, I love that man, and brought what was considered a jazz, which influenced Langston Hughes in his book of collection poetry. So you see how that works together: music, art, writing, the books, and all of that, reinforced. Alan Lockley, his The New Negro, that was published in 1925. So you have like to start around with W.E.B Du Bois at 1910, right after his infamous book, The Souls of Black Folk, that I'm reading now. And then from 1910 to going to 1920 is where it really showed black folks migrating and creating these vibrant, like I said earlier, community. And then these books are being released. So this one right here was The New Negro by Alan Locke, which is an anthology that defined the move. So if you wanted to kind of go to the forefathers, which is Alan Locke and W.E.B Du Bois, this would be a book that you can kind of connect with that. It's called The New Negro. And then like later on, where you have more work by the ones I talked about, like Langston Hughes, his collection of books is called The Weary Blues. So it's a poetry collection, famous. It's really famous, blending the rhythms of jazz and blues. So the musician there also contributed to the movement. It helped to define and put a stamp on it and encourage more creativity. So that's a good book to kind of see. And then we have Claude McKay. He had a book they called Harlem Shadows that was published around 1922. So here we are. It's about to take off, the Harlem Renaissance. And this was an influential poetry collection as well, and about the whole diaspora and stuff like that. And if we talk about the art, let's kind of pivot to the art. Good, I noticed like I think it's called the Migration series. So that was from but actually kind of after the peak, and that was Jacob Lawrence. He had like a 60-panel sequence documenting the mass movement. So that's more I would say about the history of the Harlem Renaissance, how it was so profound. It was a lot going on. W.E.B Du Bois and Alan Lockley was those ones to kind of build the foundation of that. So then in 1937 was where Their Eyes Was Watching God got published, and it really was popular. It's just she didn't get much accolades for it from then. So we kind of pivot towards a few moments to the sound. We have the Duke Ellington, we have Bessie Smith. They call her the Empress of the Blues, for her voice. And then we have Louis Armstrong, which he moved in New York when about the 1920s. So he helped to define it. So those three was the top architects of the sound. So we talked about the architect of building the foundation of what this movement would be. And then we have Langston Hughes is credited of calling the Harlem Renaissance from the new Negro movement. They called it Alan Lockley. So we have Alan Lockley and W.E.B Du Bois. I just put them at the top of the pyramid. Then you have these creative writers that, enter the contest or what have you. And that's, Langston Hughes or Near Hurston. That's the book I'm going to start reading as well. And then now we have the sound. So music is everything. So that was Duke Ellington, Bessie Smith, Louis Armstrong is noted as, the top ones. There were others. And that helped to define and to put a stamp on it. Out of that pyramid that I just described, it was the Negro Urban League with the magazine Opportunity. And then you have W.E.B Du Bois, part of NAACP. Their magazine was The Crisis that he was the editor of. And he also featured the young artists coming up. So he basically helped to create the foundation of this movement, to house it, to catalyze it. And it is infamous to this day, the Harlem Renaissance. And then you have the top tier artists that came out of that period. And that's where you have the Langston Hughes and the Claude McKay and Hurston. And I think maybe later I get more into the music part, but I really want to talk about that and just to kind of connect how Dr. W.B. Du Bois, he was famously associated with finding the leadership of the NAACP, but he also had a significant, he was like a gatekeeper because, he was in that elite group that he was part of creating people other careers. He was like what you call it, destiny helpers, as they call it. So he also had external connections to the Natural Urban League. His connection was rooted, in the shared goal of uplifting Black Americans during the early 20th century and played through the cultivation of Black middle class. So his connections were the intellectual alignment on the talented 10th. So Du Bois, through his advocacy, promoted the cultivation of, like I mentioned, the Black middle class to represent the race that aligned with the foundational goals of the National Urban League. And it paralleled to the civil rights where, Dr. Du Bois building the NAACP, that was founded around 1909. So the Negro Urban League was formed shortly after that. So this is again is that second band creating another magazine that had more focus on expression of your identity. It wasn't so much political. Where Dr. Du Bois on with NAACP, they had to be because they were still fighting for Black folks' rights or what have you. And so his magazine, The Crisis, was with the National Urban League that was formed shortly after the NAACP to address industrial and social conditions for the Black migrants. So both organizations was part of the same era, right? Top-down approach to civil rights by intellectual elites. And some artists got criticized if they didn't kind of focus on that all the way. And that's where Zora Neale Hurston like didn't really get what she, for me, more because she deserved it because of her book and her writing. But yeah, Du Bois and Desert P, they kind of helped guide and worked along with the Negro Urban League and helped to kind of define that. But the Negro Urban League was often more focused on direct social service and where Du Bois was more of that outspoken political advocacy. So as we look at the shared of action in the early 1900s as a socialist and activist, Dr. Du Bois was involved in the same intellectual circle. So he was around those that fostered the development that we know at this point was called the Negro Urban League and focused on, so his focus was more on the economics of it. So to me, I'm jumping ahead, their eyes were watching God, you know, what the criticism were to me was unjust. So yeah, definitely spend more time on it and be a part of giving her, her accolades of what she deserved. She wrote a beautiful book. So even though like Du Bois wasn't direct like founder officer of the Negro Urban League, he was a key figure in the same intellectual movement that birthed the organization and focused on really professional uplifting by leading an advocacy focus with the NAACP. So I think that's why he created or part of creating the crisis. So he showed a very significant historical and clerical connection with that National Urban League. Between those two was really the framework of creating what we call the Harlem Renaissance today. So, like during the 20th century, Du Bois was like NAACP. They had a lot of focus of writing about legal and political rights, while the Negro Urban League focused on more economic and social welfare for Black folks moving to northern cities. So basically, to me, the experience, the journey, and to express that in an intellectual way that was very important mattered. All right. So as the editor of the NAACP magazine, The Crisis, Dr. Du Bois, he used the platform to highlight and support the work. So they worked both in hand during the Renaissance, finding talent, and that was where they was having contests to what it is now. So they had like a shared leadership strategy going on to make sure that they was covering everything. So which makes me feel, I don't know why she was still denied or didn't get her accolades when she was to me doing exactly what Dr. Du Bois was mentioning to. Sometimes you have to have more than one personality to get it done. But yeah, that's on that part. Do that. So the Harlem Renaissance to me, oh, why I wrap this up, was a way for a platform to show the best of what Black folks can do. And this is how you do it. That's basically it. And to kind of get more familiarized with it. So I'm not going to take up much time. I just want to kind of talk about that and get ready for my Power Reading Week. I hope you enjoyed this. I do plan to kind of maybe do another part 3. All right, I'll talk to you in the next one.
My destiny's renewed where we go. ATL ringing prosperity bells. We hold, yeah, we so bold. No more playing with my mind. I'm ahead of my time. Miss Ryan, I am. When love was divine, pour me some mole wine. They call her Nichel Mule. Hey, she bringing glory our way. Hey, all the way. Imhotep, we wait, we bait. No more waiting on our destinies, too late. We switch up the fate. No more gatekeeps, we step on those that held us back. That's a fact. We shine back like the golden minds of Egyptian kings, all gold rings. Yet in Kemet we met. Our kingdoms were raw, approaching greatness with Thor. I'm an emperor king. Watch my pyramids rise in the midst of Pleiadians. From Mars to the stars, here in Nishimole. With our destinies of Mole Kashmir, we are her besties, we all are thee. You can say his name is Jesus, here's the new game, the source I am. For reality, I run this gold bills of notoriety. We gotta bring it, cause we came from Mars. We rise for the crown, plus we got all the bars. I'm the emperor of Mole, I know who I are.
Was born with my purpose, birthright. Mole Kismet of world dynasties. Mole Kismet of world destinies. Get your own success if you're blessed without calling my chest. I never rest because I am the best. In this world of my purpose, my choices defeated all the rest. Jesus said, here you are, Queen Empress. Now I grant here my besties. They are Emperor, Kings. Formalize, Atlantis, ATL, here we are, getting it, we are gold, we don't mold, we hold, we are the new Renaissance of Mole, Kismet, who am I? Remember the times, can't wait till we live in the Mole world, that we are no longer critique, oh wait, it's now Mole world.
Hey, she's bringing our glory, Imhotep, we wait. We bait, no more waiting for our destinies. No more gatekeeps. We step up on those that held us back. Now you laugh. We shine back like ancient Egyptian kings.
This is our destinies, a Mole, moments of love in ancient